You'll have 10 minutes and there is no Q&A. You may not use slides or videos, and you probably don't want more than 2 or 3 people on your team to do this. And what I will do is give you feedback after all the presentations so that it's fair that everybody, the last presentation doesn't get the advantage of the feedback from the first ones. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. And we'll go in the order that they do. Oh,
no. Just for everybody, if you could stay on this side of this screen because the camera will be filming on this side. So just when you do your presentation, stay on that side.
Awesome. Thank you. So on this side of when you say on this side of the screen.
Like where you were standing. Like
where
exactly
I was
where you were standing.
Okay. Lovely. We can totally do that. All right. We're going to go in this order. We'll do Deep Roots, then Coral Print, then Foursight, and then Carbon Smart. Okay. You good with that?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. So I will set my timer. And why doesn't Deep Roots get oriented? All right, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Let's go.
Thank you for having us once again, ISOCARP. As a group of city and regional planners, we are excited to be presenting to you again, designing sustainable cities for a growing world. Again, we want to mention that it's very important moving forward that the breadth of these ethical issues are very hard to discuss in a 10-minute topic and really take a lot of consideration moving forward. We really want to also mention that for the purposes of discussing these ethical issues, we find that it's most important to start by discussing the large-scale solutions that we have, although we don't want to ignore that smaller-scale solutions are extremely important. These could include street trees, green facades, and green roofs. I'd like to hand it to Micah to now begin discussing some of the ethical issues that we were discussing yesterday.
Thank you so much, Owen. Yeah, so to quickly sum us up a little bit, we have a lot of ethical benefits that come into play with our solution. First of all, we're talking about social inclusion. These implemented green spaces make sure there's opportunities and recreational, equitable opportunities for everyone, regardless of someone's socioeconomic background. But we're also looking at cultural enrichment here. Green spaces serve as club hubs, but also they're open to community engagement opportunities, which brings us all together with nature included. And then lastly, I want to quickly emphasize resilient communities, because we have seen that it's also an environmental issue here, an environmental ethic issue, because communities that live within green spaces are much more resilient against the climate change impact we talked about yesterday. They have lower levels of air pollution, and they're better reduced against the urban heat island. Owen?
One of the main issues that you had questions about yesterday was discussing why it's important or why it's bad that people are leaving cities. And here, this is where we need to discuss that it's absolutely essential that cities become the solution. They are not the problem. Urban sprawl is a massive problem throughout city development, and it does cause much of the urban heat island effect and really grows that. That's why it's important that people stay in cities and we design cities around those people to get them to stay. Because the most vulnerable people are often the ones who can't leave, and they're the ones who are stuck in these artificial environments. This brings us back to the idea of Kantian ethics, which addresses the idea that we have a duty as a society to those around us and the world that we live in. It is absolutely essential that we focus on building a world for each other and focusing on helping each other. Now, Shreya, would you like to join the conversation?
Yes, thank you so much, Owen. So an ethical issue that really becomes apparent when we have this discussion about green spaces is that different socioeconomic groups have different levels of access to nature and green spaces. People who live in wealthier areas tend to be closer to parks because cities tend to build parks in areas with wealthier people. And to go even more into detail, they tend to maintain these parks. And going outside of just parks, even things such as like the trees on the streets and in the neighborhood are much more well maintained in the wealthier neighborhoods than in the lower income areas. And so something else that we want to note along these lines are that a lot of the people who are on the lower scale of the socioeconomic scale are marginalized communities. And that kind of brings us to this other discussion on marginalized communities and how people of certain races and backgrounds have less access to nature and green spaces. Something else that we Something else that's a possible concern that we wanted to address was this worry that if these green spaces and greenery is added to the lower income neighborhoods, that the prices and houses of the houses and apartments in these areas will increase, and that these people will no longer be able to stay there because they're not able to afford their rent. However, we believe that this is not something that should be at the forefront of any decision making at all, because most cities have adequate rent control that should be able to deal with this. Additionally, we were asked about this, how we would deal with residents who have this not in my backyard mindset, or are worried that by adding green spaces or greenery, that it will be taking away some of their land or that they'll have to give up something within their neighborhood. So firstly, we wanted to just say that for creating parks, it doesn't necessarily mean taking things away from a neighborhood and area. And we really hope that ISA Park will be able to partner with cities and with private firms in order to create possibly parks that are on top of buildings or in areas where there's space that can be used that isn't currently being used. And we also think that another way to deal with this is to highlight the benefits that the green spaces have to offer, and even involve these neighborhoods and these members of the community within the decision-making process so that their specific needs and preferences can be met. And then another issue that kind of comes into topic when we discuss this is that these green spaces, especially if they're like parks being built, will likely be used as gathering places for unsheltered people. And I wanted to first take a moment to deconstruct this idea that of what if homeless people take over our new green spaces. And I firstly wanted to say that going back to our earlier discussion about equity and access, homeless and unsheltered people deserve to access to these green spaces just as much as anyone else. And so we feel as if this should be a topic of concern, but rather a way to involve them in the decision-making process, either directly or just in terms of considering them. So going a little more into detail about this, one way that this can happen is city planners could talk to some of the homeless people in the area and figure out if there are any specific needs of theirs that can be met through this, or even just talking to homelessness relief agencies and seeing what they have to say. And something else that can be done is creating community activities that incorporate the homeless people, such as creating community gardens that they're able to help with that would give them a further sense of purpose. And these are all just amazing ways to embrace the homeless community rather than shut them out. And next, I'll be passing it back to Owen.
Thank you, Shreya. Again, I wanted to bring up another ethical framework, and that is biocentrism, which is the fundamental respect for living beings, and this includes everything from animals, plants, to entire ecosystems. In yesterday's conversation, it was brought up whether or not parks or even smaller scale greening initiatives actually help with increased biodiversity. And the answer to that is yes. Although it's not cute and cuddly animals that you would expect to see in a park, such as squirrels and bunnies that you might see in an urban environment, parks are safe havens for all sorts of insects, bugs, and other flying animals that need places to go. It also provides a fantastic opportunity to introduce indigenous species and native species back into their home landscapes and their home environments. Again, Shreya, what else do you have to say?
Before we continue on that, just to quickly add, I want to bring in some very special ethical benefits that Owen actually mentioned here. And what's important here is that, again, we connect environment with community. So let's take a quick look at the value these ethical benefits bring within our communities. So imagine a park or green space where people from all sorts of backgrounds communicate with each other and share their knowledge and experiences. This is something we want, but also need. And the great thing is green spaces provide the opportunities for this. Green spaces are there for people to, as mentioned, share their knowledge, experience, but also it's a way for them to build connections. And the importance here is that we cannot overlook this important aspect of social connection when also promoting mental well-being at the same time, just like we did yesterday. Another point here is that green spaces contribute to community resilience. It's a place for people to reconnect, relax, but also reflect on themselves, which again contributes to the mental and physical health aspects that we discussed earlier. But as Freya mentioned, think about times of crisis. Green spaces are here as shelters, gathering points, really standing for an ethical symbol of strength within our communities. Now, we find it crucial to not forget about the issue with access and equity among those green spaces. We see that not all communities have equal access to the resources and these green spaces in general, and we see that inequalities exist. Now, we're talking about a matter of social justice here, and we want to bridge the gap between the different socioeconomic groups we talked about earlier. And the great thing here is that these green spaces bridge these gaps with us. Green spaces bridge these gaps by being accessible to everyone, but they also offer free or affordable activities that promotes and makes everyone inclusive within these green spaces. Now, taking all this into account that I just mentioned, we are approaching this from an ethical framework perspective, and we're making use of the ethical framework of environmental justice. This term refers to the emphasis of fair treatment and involvement of all people, regardless of someone's background. Think about race, gender, but also someone's income level. That all has to do with the accessibility of green spaces. In context of the green spaces, the environmental justice framework calls for equitable access to these spaces for everyone, regardless, as mentioned, for someone's background. It demands that all communities have the right to be included, but also to participate in the decisions regarding green spaces. I'll hand it off to Shreya one more time to wrap this up.
Thank you so much, Micah. So in conclusion, we want to reemphasize that green spaces are not just patches of land. They are ethical beacons guiding us towards a more resilient, connected, and equitable society. We can create a world where everyone has the opportunity to benefit from the wonders nature has to offer. So let us work together and bridge the gaps and build a future where green spaces. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm the ethics consultant. And this is Diego, our strategic consultant. Today we are speaking to FEMSA, or Mexican multinational operations, specifically in beverages such as Coca-Cola. We are coral print, and our idea is to 3D print coral reefs out of recycled plastics. In this, we are working with two sustainable development goals that are marine life and the responsible production and consumption. So to give you a little bit of context, over 148,000 tons of plastic waste is thrown into the Pacific in Mexico by 12 rivers each year. This obviously it has a lot of impact in our marine ecosystems in a lot of different ways. The one we are most concerned about right now are coral reefs because they are the habitat for the majority of the marine species, and it also acts as a barrier against natural disasters between the sea and the land. So, the destruction of these coral reefs have been going around for a couple of decades right now, but it has been recently spiking in the last couple of years. And it is a combination of two factors, the natural factors and the human activities. Today we want to focus on the human activities and how what we're doing continues impacting and how we can stop this. So, Mexico has a lot of fishing industry, and to be able to compare with the demand, the practices have started to become very destructive, such as cyanide fishing. This is unsustainable long term because it doesn't give the sea the right amount of time to actually slow down and breathe again. There's also a lot of tourism in Mexico, as you probably all know, especially in our beaches. And this is partially very important for the communities because they are the tourist guides and the people that sustain themselves through it. But these practices have become unmanageable, and due to this poor management, there are a lot of things that are going wrong. So coral reefs are being physically affected because there are no right ways to keep up with the demand of our tourism. So there's a lot of habitat degradation and overexploitation overseas. If we continue down this path, there will be a lot of loss in jobs specifically that is a great area of consideration. On the other side, as we all know, climate change is increasing and it is getting worse and worse. And this affects directly to the sea because the temperatures in the seawater rises and the coral starts to bleach. For those of you who don't know, coral bleaching is when the corals expel the symbiotic algae, which is their nutrients and their colors. In long term, they start to die. So if we don't have these corals, we don't have a barrier against natural disasters. And this brings us to our last point, that is the coastal development. So right now, there's a lot of urbanization in our coastals. because of the communities. We want to organize them and bring them closer. But these practices also are unsustainable because of the excavation and sediment dumping. So in the long run, all this urbanization will be for nothing because all these coastal communities will have to be moved to another place due to safety. So to sum up a little bit, what will happen to these communities? We will are facing a lot of lost jobs, loss of tourism, and most importantly, we are damaging the health of our ecosystems. Right now, to give you a little bit more of a solution, is Diego, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks so much. As Natalie just stated, this is a real concerning problem. So we, as 4 industrial designers, decided to create this idea, this project of reconstructing built reefs with 3D printing technology and recycled plastics. This will bring environmental, social, and economic benefits to the local communities. We'll be restoring marine ecosystems, reducing plastic pollution, even will be fostering biodiversity. We will be protecting the coast from erosion, and we will be giving to the local community easier access to research and education. For all of this to happen, we need your part, our commitment, and the participation of the local community. Our responsibilities are plan for the plastic recollection. We need to manufacture and design the corals. We also need to make a local hiring program and collaborate with the local authorities and environmental organizations. FEMSA, we need your help. We need you to provide financial support, even check the economical viability of the project. We need your network to promote it within it. We also need you to collaborate with the local community because they're going to participate in the plastic recollection. They will have to take advantage of employment and opportunities. They have to maintain a real commitment to the true project so it can work. And for our own purposes, we need them to provide us feedback and support so we can continue to innovate and create better solutions. So FEMSA, a Mexican multinational company that operates mainly in beverages, also known as Coca-Cola FEMSA, the biggest bottler in the world. We know you support sustainability with alignment of the UN goals by emphasizing recyclement, by water management, and reducing the single-use plastics. You have your corporate goals for 2030 are having 85% renewable electricity, water balance, and having 0 waste landfills. Your ethical code is honesty, integrity, and respect. These values also that align with our values in Coral Creek. Last year, FEMSA revenue was $41.6 billion. Great. Our initial investment is only $45,000. Low risk, high reward, right? In equipment, we'll need 5 Creality K1 Maxes and 3 Tronxy 3D printers. In total, 8 3D printers. We'll need the plastic shredder so we can recycle the PET and the PLA, and we'll have to feed that plastic into an X6 extruder setup. And in software, we'll need the Rhino 3D modeling program for our group of designers. We'll also need the Ultimaker Cura to make the slice of the 3D designs. And finally, we have to have the equipment of 3D PCs of racers, so the group of designers can work. In salaries, we'll be having a team of marine biologists because they will have the responsibilities to select the destinations and work with natural corals to cut fragments from them so we can implant them in the new designs that we make. We will also need a chemical engineer. His responsibility is to create the non-toxic additive for the plastics, right? And well, the designers obviously they'll have to create the design for the coastal reef. And finally, and most important, we will have salaries for the local plastic regulators. Thank you so much. Hope you can help us save the La Grana de Santa Maria.
All right, you ready?
Whole Food and the VP of Amazon. Thank you for inviting us back to further discuss how the synergy between these two groups can revolutionize the grocery industry. To give a little recap about what we discussed yesterday, we will have a two-part proposal that emphasizes in both parts collecting large amounts of environmental data to transform the grocery industry. So, for the consumer side, we're looking at the Whole Foods app and implementing this environmental data so consumers can see the whole cost of their goods. They will be able to open the app and not only see the cost, not like in dollars, they will not only see the cost by the nutrition label, but they will see environmental costs such as water use, land use, and carbon emissions. This will empower them to make more sustainable choices, and we will further incentivize it by adding game-like challenges and rewards. And then we will expand our impact beyond just your consumers, but also through the companies in general by using Amazon technology to create a cloud database between retailers and suppliers. Here, they can have real-time data analytics, which will usher a level of transparency and accurate data measurement never seen before. So today, we will discuss the frameworks that will guide this, along with the ethical issues that it is solving. And then we will foresight some of the issues that may arise as we're implementing these, while also always keeping in mind our key stakeholders.
In conducting business ethics, you of course need an ethical framework. The framework we adopt is intergenerational ethics. We believe that current society holds a moral obligation to future generations to provide a livable earth, and we believe that this is our solution to do so. Future generations' decision-making should be informed by an abundance of data and not the converse, and that is what we strive to accomplish.
So it's really important when we're looking at our strategy to first identify the ethical issues that exist within the grocery industry. And we saw two main issues. Firstly, we saw that there's intentional deception within the grocery industry. And second, we saw that there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to environmental data. So let's dive into this. Currently, your average consumer is in the dark about the environmental impact of their product. Consumers want to shop sustainably and are often willing to spend more money on sustainable products. However, they can't differentiate between which claims are true and which aren't. This cost differential that they're willing to pay really paves the way for marketers to employ greenwashing and mislead these consumers. Greenwashing is an incredibly prevalent ethical issue within the grocery industry, as we see that 1 in every 3 publicly listed companies was associated with greenwashing in the year 2022. Greenwashing, to give you some context, is using false or misleading data in your advertising and marketing campaigns to make your products seem more sustainable than they actually are. To give you an example of this, a firm can claim a 50% increase in recyclable materials when they've actually shifted their content from 2% recyclable materials to 3%. This may seem like a minuscule shift. However, when you scale this up to the millions of consumers who are shopping sustainably, this is a huge change, which is going right into the pockets of these unethical corporations. As Whole Foods, it's imperative that you address this. And we see that you can do this through our strategy and really align yourself with your mission to promote sustainable products to your consumers. You can do this through implementing our strategy and giving consumers the knowledge that they need to make informed choices about what they're buying.
Yes, and while this is a huge issue, it doesn't even encompass the entire thing of it. There are so many companies that are trying to push towards these sustainable endeavors, but the industry as a whole doesn't have the accurate information to make these decisions. How can you incite change if you don't have an accurate way to measure if you are really doing it? That is the unique aspect of this proposal. Not only would this proposal incite change in and of itself, but it will allow all companies to go with scientific-based initiatives that allow them to make proven gains. When we talk about this means that you take scientific data that you know is given to increase success and implement it so you can see where the information is going and where your funds can make an effective change. In economics, we talk a lot about KPIs, your return on investment, and things like that. And when you have those expectations in place, you need to know exactly what is going to happen, and you have to have measured outcomes. We need to have this done for environmental ethics and environmental sustainability just the same. As we do this, you will be able to incite change throughout the entire industry.
So it's also really important when looking at this issue that we look at the potential ethical implications of our strategy itself. And to do this, we must first look at who the key stakeholders are. Amazon and Whole Foods. We hold you as one of our utmost stakeholders because it's essential that you align yourself with both having your relationship with the public and having an ethical outlook. And we see that our strategy allows you to do this in a number of ways, but primarily through providing consumers with the data that they need to make sustainable choices and through encouraging producers to be more sustainable in their efforts. We also see these producers as another key stakeholder, and this is particularly relevant as we look at the slew of legislation that's coming in, which is requiring environmental product data to be included within these producers' supply chains. So what's essential to look at here first is the small consumer. We want to make sure that we're not placing an undue data burden on these small producers and making sure that they can keep up within this competitive market. We also have to look at larger corporations and making sure that we're holding them accountable for the potential disproportionate environmental impact that they may be having through their production. However, our most important stakeholder when doing this ethical analysis is your consumer. Your consumer is currently in the dark about the true impact, and so it's essential that you differentiate yourself from these unethical chains by giving them the data that they need. Through doing this, we can empower our consumer to differentiate the marketing from the product that they actually want and move towards a future that we're proud of and we can leave for generations to come.
And speaking about producers, a concern that we would like to address is the potential for small producers to go under in the implementation of our environmental product data. When nutrition labels and R codes and QR codes were implemented, a lot of small producers went under because they were unable to pay the upfront cost of implementing this in their production. We'd like to say that this probably will not be the case. In collaboration with Whole Foods and Amazon, we're going to be the first on the market, which allows us to work with legislators and allow us to create subsidy-based programs to allow small consumers, even the smallest producer, to ensure that they do not face an upfront financial burden. We in fact see this as a boon for small producers, as the smaller, more local producers will experience an upfront environmental impact rating that is significantly lower than larger producers and give them a competitive advantage on market. And speaking about larger producers, we actually think that another issue that we would like to address is the potential for large producers and multinational corporations to kick back against transparent environmental measures, seeing as how they will have an explicitly higher environmental output than smaller corporations. We believe that any corporation pushing against transparency is a corporation that has something to hide. And by adopting a universal objective measure of environmental data, large corporations as well as small corporations will be able to move in a sustainable direction.
Yes, and as we are emphasizing transparency, we also need to emphasize neutrality. The purpose is to give the entire supply chain more data, more information, and we are trying to meet them where we're at. For a consumer, this doesn't mean demonizing their way of life if they follow a certain diet, but it's allowing them to understand how these sustainable measures can impact their own decision making so they can fit it into theirs. As for producers, we're not trying to tell them that they're the problem. We're trying to allow them to see the problems for themselves so they are also empowered to make solutions. You as Amazon are not going to say, oh, this company is good, this company is bad. You are letting the data speak for itself in a manner that is communicable to every part of the supply chain, which has never been able to happen before. You are not demonizing anyone. Instead, you are empowering them to make the right choices.
To conclude on the topic, it's essential that we consider both the ethical issues already present in the market and the ethical issues which may arise as a consequence of our strategy. However, we feel that we can incorporate these two, and within our strategy, we can empower consumers to make better decisions and more sustainable decisions. We can allow producers to be more transparent and both allow small producers to be competitive on the market and large producers to be accountable to their emissions. In doing this, you, Whole Foods and Amazon, have the power in your hands to create this knowledge and pass it on to consumers. This knowledge has the capacity to inspire real change in our world and lead us towards a generation, the future that we'll be proud to leave for generations to come. Thank you.
All right, and finally, we have carbon smart solutions. Ready?
Yes.
Great.
Good morning. My name is Diego, and this is my colleague Cristina, and we are here because you, the board of directors of Repsol, has asked for a deeper ethical analysis of Repsol reforestation project Motor Verde. However, we have not only come with an analysis of Motor Verde, but we have also came up with an alternative solution that is not only more impactful and effective, but also meets all the ethical criteria. Before starting with the ethical analysis, it's important to remember why we are here. A few weeks ago, Repsol, the main oil company in Spain, was sued by Iberdrola, one of its main competitors in the energy market. Repsol has been accused of greenwashing and also illegal competition practices. Additionally, last year in the UK, Repsol was sanctioned for similar circumstances. Regarding the ethical analysis, it's important to keep in mind that Repsol reforestation project Motor Verde focuses on SDG 13, which refers to climate action. In this particular case, the most relevant goal is to reduce the carbon emissions. Now, the ethical analysis will have three components, which are risk, additionality, and finally, greenwashing. I will start with risk. Although reforestation projects such as Motor Verde are implemented with the aim of significantly reducing carbon emissions, when these projects are implemented on a large scale, there are some negative effects that can be generated. Those negative effects are fire risk, reduction of soil quality, loss of biodiversity, altered water cycles, and introduction of non-native species. Of all of these negative effects, the most relevant one is fire risk. This is because the emissions that are released through forest fire represents 20% of the worldwide CO2 emissions. And according to some studies, it is predicted that it will increase by 20% until 2050. Secondly, as I mentioned before, we have the additionality. It is a key principle in the evaluation of climate change mitigation projects, such as Motor Verde. So what is additionality? It is a determination of whether an intervention has an impact when it is compared to a baseline. Lack of additionality, on the contrary, can undermine a project effectiveness and integrity. A carbon project, such as Motor Verde, is additional when its implementation has derived in carbon emissions removal or reduction that wouldn't have occurred if the project wasn't implemented. Finally, in reforestation projects, additionality is limited because the land does not regenerate, and therefore additionality is exclusively the life of the tree. It means that it will only storage CO2 for 100 years, unlike other projects that can storage CO2 for 100 years to 1,000 years, and in the best scenario, above 1,000 years. Finally, we have the last component, and this is the most relevant one, is greenwashing. So why is this the most important component? This is because it relates the previous element, and also because this is the reason why Repsol was sued by Iberdrola and also sanctioned in the UK. So, as you know, greenwashing is the act of making false or misleading statements regarding the environmental benefits of a project or practice. In this case, considering that the project of Repsol has low low storage of low durability, has low additionality, and it can also have negative effects, there is a high risk that the company is engaging in greenwashing. People may say that the reason why Repsol is implementing Motor Verde is because reforestation projects are the most economically affordable, and also they are the one that requires the lowest implication throughout the process of its implementation. So the reading that can be made from this situation is that Repsol is not truly committed in the reduction of carbon emissions, but they are implementing this project because for a term of profitability and also image. Considering that greenwashing is a practice that deserves serious questioning, since it involves claiming to be carrying out better actions than they actually are, we highly recommend you, the board of directors of Repsol, to seriously reconsider the implementation of the reforestation project Motor Verde. Having explained and analyzed from an ethical perspective this project, now my colleague Cristina will explain our alternative solution.
Thank you, Diego. So our proposal to turn all this around is to replace reforestation projects by a carbon farming project. What is carbon farming? Carbon farming consists in the plantation of crops and is designed to capture CO2 from the atmosphere and store it in the soil in the form of organic matter. How does this process occur? First, carbon dioxide is captured from the atmosphere through the photosynthesis of plants. It is then settled in the soil as plants grow and develop, and this further stimulates the growth and the rotation of other crops and other plants, which improves considerably soil's health and productivity. But more than just the agricultural benefits that carbon farming may have, it is very important to acknowledge that carbon farming would contribute significantly to several sustainable development goals. Among them, SDG 13, SDG 14, and SDG 7. Regarding SDG 13, which is the one on climate action, we know that carbon farming would reduce significantly the carbon emissions in the atmosphere, as well as reducing the carbon footprint of this company, Repsol. On the other hand, regarding SDG 14, which is the one on life on land, we know that carbon farming would increase biodiversity and increase the amount of the species living in this area, as well as improving the soil quality and its health and productivity, as well as the soil structure. And last of all, regarding SDG number 7, which is the one on clean and affordable energy, as we know, Repsol is a works in the fossil fuel industry and therefore is a provider, an energy provider. So if it compromises itself with the true reduction and the effective reduction of its carbon emissions into the atmosphere, it would be contributing to the planet by providing consumers the possibility to have access to affordable and clean energy. But more than this, I think it is very important to really see how this carbon farming project would counteract all the ethical and the sustainable dilemmas that my colleague Diego has just explained that the reforestation project entails. So first of all, carbon farming would reduce every risk. It would reduce fire risks. It would also improve the water conservation. It would reduce soil structure and reduce the soil degradation, as well as increasing crop diversity. On the other hand, we know that carbon farming projects have much greater additionality, as there is an increased organic matter storage in the soil, and as this additionality lasts for a much longer time than the additionality of any reforestation project that is now in place. And last of all, the most important critique that we have been accused of is Repsol have been accused of is greenwashing. So we have seen that carbon farming offers real, measurable, and tangible results of its improvement for the soil. First, for the biodiversity. Secondly, for the improvement of the soil structure and the reduction of its degradation. And last of all, for its effectiveness in capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Therefore, for Repsol, it would be very successful to really implement this type of project because it would provide yourself with a possibility to claim your actions and back them up with concrete evidence of these actions you're taking. So it is not just a matter of reputation, but it is also an opportunity for you, Repsol, to lead with integrity and to show what you truly stand for. Thank you very much for your attention, and we hope that you implement this project.
All right. Great job. Some really cool solutions, which excite me as just a participant on this planet. So, all right. So first, I did forget to introduce myself and give you my context because I think that's important to know the lens I'm coming from. So my name is Kelly Watson, and I run a consulting company in human resources and organizational behavior. So obviously, I'm always focused on the human component of things. I also have written 2 books on gender. And so some of the ethics around what happens in the workplace with gender and certainly with DEI is also very important to me. And interestingly, another little side project, I am on my city's Parks and Recs Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission. So I know a little bit about parks. So the first project, really interesting, love this idea of adding green space. Obviously, it's something I advocate for in my role on the Parks Commission. I thought you did a great job of balancing a lot of really sticky ethical issues with parks because parks get funded from tax revenue, which is based on the percentage of value of your home. So you properly address the problem that in lower income communities, the houses are worth less, and therefore there's less money to spend on parks. And so that provides a sticky problem. And then, of course, as soon as you put in a park, everybody wants to live near it. So then the housing values go up, which is great because then you can fund the park. But at the same time, all the folks who were living in the low income housing end up getting displaced. So really big problem, which I thought you did a great job of balancing. The other thing that you talked about, which is inclusion, social inclusion. So a lot of parks, ironically, have in the past been designed to only include some people and not others. And an example is that you addressed, I think, really well, was homeless folks. So they will set up a park so that somebody can't sleep on a bench. They'll put dividers between a bench. And that is specifically to exclude people who might want to sleep on that bench. In many cases, there's been parks set up with skateboarding or areas like that, which is great, but it often includes men and not women or boys and not girls. As opposed to setting up spaces where, there was a really innovative thing done recently where they put hammocks in circles all around a park, and it was always full of girls and they were all hanging out there. And so really paying mindfulness to the types of facilities you put in place can either include or exclude different communities. So I love that you did talk about some of that, the social inclusion as being one of the ethical issues that is related in parks. One of the things you touched on at the end, that programming really helps with these problems. So if you are worried about the park being used in a way that is not desirable, putting in place programming can often really help. So again, I think you did a great job of identifying a lot of the ethical issues. Social justice or environmental justice was one of them, but that was probably the most obvious. And when you got into social inclusion and even the mental health and the social connection piece, I thought that was really great. And the biocentrism of also helping with other ecosystems, which of course promotes more life. So thought you did a great job. In terms of the presentation, great job, very confident, you knew your stuff, you don't need the cue cards. Okay, I always tell this, I know it makes you feel more secure, but you barely looked at them. So trust yourself, you don't need to worry about it. So great job for that presentation. All right, second presentation, coral print. Love this idea, absolutely brilliant. I think I went to bed thinking about it last night because I think it's such a great technological solution to 3D print. They want to recycle the bottles to 3D print coral reefs and replace this habitat, which is really great. And you talked about some of the negative things that were happening, the cyanide fishing, which is killing the reef, which then in turn kills the fish and takes away the livelihood of these fishers. The tourism, which is, as you said, the Mayan community is most impacted when tourism is impacted and there's no sustainability there. And that the barrier reef is also protecting human development. And if you take it away, then that is going to be gone. You talked about the ethical code of the company being honesty, integrity, and respect, and that you made reference to it being aligned with our goals, which I think is correct. I guess the piece that I would love to have seen is more of the ethical framework that here, because while you alluded to it with these people's livelihoods and things like that, I think that there was an opportunity to maybe engage that a little better. But overall, again, I hope you guys make this thing happen, because this is a really very, very cool idea. I think also from a presentation perspective, you had a very complex solution with a lot of moving parts, and I think you did a good job of really trying to get us to understand all of those. I just think you could have spent more on the ethics piece and less on what machinery you require, but I appreciate that you had a lot of things going on in your presentation. And again, I can't say enough how much I really feel like this is something that if you don't make happen, I hope somebody else can, because it's a really great idea. Really brilliant. So nice job, team. All right, Whole Foods and the data collection. I love this because you're taking, especially Amazon, which is just seen as such an organization that people don't appreciate, because of all the negative, they have negative, harmful things they're doing with their workers and their anti-union, stuff. Certainly the impact of data centers environmentally is something that, you always want to weigh, but you're taking what they have that can be a negative and you're trying to turn it into something positive, which is really exciting and a really kind of cool idea. I love that you engaged the intergenerational ethics framework as a way to connect why this impact to the environment is so important, because you're actually trying to keep future generations from harm and keep, that protected. And then the intentional deception and misinformation as being the greenwashing ethics issue, I think, is another one that you balanced nicely. And in your stakeholder analysis, it was great because it's not just that there were these ethical issues, but you were actually balancing the needs of different communities when you did that analysis. And so I thought that was really great. That idea of, if we do this, here's one piece of the ethical component, but if we don't do it, here's another piece. And so you've got to balance that trade-off, right? Because, do no harm. You don't want to make it worse. So I thought you made a great case for the metrics. You only had 10 minutes. I wasn't 100% clear how you're going to police it or whether that is Whole Foods, Amazon's responsibility to police it, because it seems to me that, just like Volkswagen, lied about their emissions and, there's still the potential that these folks could lie about it. But I love the idea of the transparency all the way through the chain. And for, the provider, the person who's, providing the service to the public, being the ones responsible for making sure that the vendors that they're bringing together meet those standards. So I think that was really well done. Great job. And then finally, we have the carbon credits. Really great idea also to, I don't think that I understood the negative impact of forestation. I would have thought, plant more trees. That sounds like a great idea. Who would not be, for that? But I've also watched Woody Harrelson's documentary on the carbon farming, and I'm completely intrigued by that as a solution. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I love that you're pointing out the ethical problem of eliminating this greenwashing, that they may have been just planting the tree to kind of give a nod to it, but not necessarily actually making a difference. I did want to point out, and this was something that Jeff Thies has made clear in this whole thing that I guess I didn't even really connect the dots until this week, but that just because it addresses an SDG or just because it keeps you from a legal impact doesn't make it an ethical issue. So make sure you connect the dots to the actual ethical issues here. And I think you started to with the greenwashing, but you immediately went to legal. It's illegal, but it's also unethical to greenwash. And make sure that you talk about the harm that actually can happen. And here's the big problem with carbon emissions, right? Is that it is this esoteric thing that everybody, because we no longer can look at a smokestack and see orange guck coming out because of some of the great things that we've done in the last 25 years to prevent that. People can't connect the dots between carbon emissions and life. and that's why we have so many short-term solutions in the world and not a lot of the long-term solutions. So I think it's really important for you to bring that back and connect the dots, maybe take a page from the book of the last team who was talking about the intergenerational, like what are we leaving? These are your kids. They're not just, random people. They're your children. They're your grandchildren. And they may not survive if we don't have a planet left for them. So just trying to bring that back again to connecting it to harm to humans so that it's an ethical issue, which will be more motivating for someone to make a difference with, and to want to do something. But I think that the solution is a really great one. And I hope in all of these cases, I hope these companies go ahead and take advantage of it because it's really well done. So great job, team. Appreciate you all. You're fantastic. All right.